Welcome to the Commissaire Commentaries podcast. I am Ryan Fu with my host, Marcy Weiss. We are supported by the USA Cycling National Technical Commission, and we are very excited to finally bring this podcast idea to reality. Marcy, if you would like to tell us more about what's the purpose of our podcast.
Absolutely. So we are seeking to increase awareness of what bike race officials do, spark interest in officiating, and share best practices, and most importantly, build a strong officiating community. So we're hoping to do that not only among officials, but the larger cycling community, as well as even the world as a whole. So we're excited to bring you Commissaire Commentaries.
I am very honored today to present our very first guest with us on the podcast, Noreen Landis-Tyson from Colorado Springs, Colorado. She is our track international commissaire extraordinaire. She has over 40 years of officiating experience. Before we start getting into the questions, I'd just like to share a fond memory of Noreen. I think both of us like John Denver music. And this goes back to 2007 Tour of California, my first time ever working with Noreen, and my first big international stage race. That week, we were in a car with Sean Farrell. And those who don't know Sean Farrell, he likes heavy metal music. And since he was the driver, he got to pick the music. And one day I was surprised. He said, okay, he had the CD collection, and he said, why don't you pick the music out of the collection? And thankfully, there was a John Denver CD. And, if you sit in a car with heavy metal music, it's finally good to have some different soothing music. So both Noreen and I commented that that was really nice for Sean to have John Denver music available. But during that week, I really learned a lot from Noreen with stage race management, judging, scoring, managing protocols, and it was really a good experience with Noreen that week. I don't get to work with her very often, and there's the memories that I do have with her. It's always been very, very nice. Any memories you'd like to share, Marcy?
So surprisingly, I really have worked with Noreen surprisingly little. So I worked with her for the first time only a few years ago at a track nationals. I believe it was Elite Track Nationals in LA. And I think she might have been either secretary or chief judge. I want to say secretary, but I remember having a great time, and I know that it was something that kept Noreen's head down quite a bit, but in the times that we were not at the track, we had a nice time with everyone. But I don't get to do quite as much track, so I haven't seen Noreen actually working as much as I might in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Noreen, we would love to start by having you tell us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and how you got started with cycling.
Sure. So first of all, I think it would not surprise most people who know me that I was actually born and raised on the East Coast in Philadelphia. And I will always have a little bit of an East Coast attitude in me, although I have lived in Colorado Springs since 1978. My husband and I moved here in 1978. And I have one daughter, Claire, who lives here in the Colorado Springs area. And I have a grandson, Asher, who has just turned 7. And my husband and I absolutely love spending time with both of them. My daughter is actually married to an Olympian. Keith is a rapid fire pistol shooter and a 3-time Olympian. And so we have lots of different ties between all of us to the Olympic movement. I also worked for 10 years for the U.S. Field Hockey Association, the Women's Field Hockey Association, and under that went to 2 Olympic Games. So I've been to several Olympic Games, most of them not tied to cycling. I just retired from a 31-year career at an organization called Community Partnership for Child Development. We are the Head Start grantee here in El Paso County. So that is lifting young children and their families who are living in poverty up alongside them to help their children be ready for success in school, and parents to set and meet their own personal goals. And absolutely loved that job, enjoyed getting out of bed every day, going to work and doing things that were so meaningful. And during that entire time, I was also an international commissaire. I became an international track commissaire in 1997. I had 3 other Americans in that class with me. Andy McCord, Phil Miller, and Randy Schaefer were all in that class. And I think the fun part about that class, aside from the people that I was there with, was that, first of all, there were probably about 50 or 55 people in that class, which is a pretty big international class. And there was only myself and Karen O'Callaghan from Australia. We were the only 2 women in that class. And it was the very first time that the UCI allowed people to choose whether or not they were going to specialize. So I actually went into that class expecting that I was going to have to take both the road and the track. And I have never been an expert on the road. The most expertise I bring to the road is exactly what Ryan just talked about, is, chief judge, that kind of thing. I can do that because that's transferable between the road and the track in a very clear and easy way. But I was very concerned that I might be able to take the test and pass it, but then nobody would want to appoint me as a president of the panel for a road championship anywhere because I did not have the experience. So I was thrilled to death to be given the opportunity to choose. And I chose to only do track. And I remember that the instructors pulled me aside and said, you're limiting yourself here by doing this. You will never be able to do an Olympic Games or anything of that sort, because at that time, everybody that they appointed was you had to work both road and track. You had to be an international in both, because they didn't want to bring people in for, different people in for different disciplines. They wanted to bring you in once and then work the entire Olympic Games or something of that sort. And I told them that I felt like this was the right thing to do. And if that was the case, so be it. And of course, we all know now that that was not a limiting factor, but at that point, it certainly appeared that way.
That's very cool. I didn't know about your other ties to other sports, especially at the Olympic level. So that's very cool to know. And so what did the start of your officiating career look like? How did cycling start to be one of those sports that you were involved with?
It's kind of funny, because when I met my husband, we were in Bowling Green, Ohio, which is he is a native Ohioan, and spent most of his young years into college in Bowling Green, where his family lived. And he was racing. He was a local racer on the road. I went with him. I'd never seen bicycle racing before. I went with him to a couple of criteriums, and he will tell you that he was not a great cyclist, but he loved doing it. He absolutely loved training. And so I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. It's mildly interesting to watch. And then we moved out here in 1978, and he started coaching a junior cycling team. And there was no velodrome here in Colorado Springs at that time. So the only thing that I had seen, actually the first velodrome race I ever saw was up in Detroit. Mark took me up to Detroit, and there was a short, compared to even 250, a short track up in Detroit. And I watched in Madison and was absolutely fascinated and could not imagine how anybody could score that on a 160 track. But the Cappies were there, who were institutions in USA cycling at that point, and were also people from Detroit. And Mary Cappy was one of the best scorers I've ever seen in my life, and she had absolutely no problem keeping track of that race, and it was fascinating. I mean, I thought that was so cool. So fast forward, we get here in 1978, and Mark starts coaching a junior team. And so we all know that juniors are typically 18 and under. And so many of them can't be driving, and if they are driving, they shouldn't be. So we went to, would take them all around the state of Colorado on weekends. And so we go to road races and criteriums, and, I was a glorified babysitter. And so I decided if I was going to do that, I needed to do something useful while I was there. So I got an official's license, and I learned how to officiate criteriums, etc. And worked my way up within Colorado, did the Coors Classic one year, on the road, that kind of thing. But the velodrome was actually built here in Colorado Springs in time for what was then called the Olympic Festival, or the Sports Festival, I think, here in Colorado Springs. And so 1983, the velodrome opened. There was a call, obviously, for officials, and I happen to live in Colorado Springs, so the feeling was, all right, well, let's just take some of these road officials and teach them how to be track officials, and that's how I actually started my track career in 1983.
That's very cool. I'm thinking that we should start a tally, Ryan, of how different people got involved, because I imagine quite a few will start with, well, I was dragged along to a lot of races, and eventually I found my way to the stand. So very cool to know. Ryan, any questions that you would like to pass on to Noreen?
Yeah, Noreen, you mentioned about a official that you observed in Michigan, and you found that fascinating with how they were able to manage scoring in Madison. Could you tell me some of the other mentors along the way in Colorado that guided you, and what important lessons did they teach you?
Yeah, well, Yvonne Van Gent taught me how to score, without a doubt, and taught me lots and lots of scoring lessons, which really held me very well on the track too. And Beth Estes was also a person who provided guidance and mentorship. I think the person that I most remember or think about when I think about my early years on the track is Paula Grill from New Jersey. Paula was and is an excellent scorer on the track, and she actually kind of founded the secretary's position on the track here in this country, and had actually suggested to me that for one of the national championships, and I think it was actually in Texas, but I can't really remember. But for one of the national championships, she said, why don't you come down and be the chief judge, and I'm going to be the secretary, and I'll show you how these two things work together. And then the next year, we'll switch positions. And so that's exactly what we did. And that is how I learned to be a race secretary. And I learned that job. And always admired Paula because obviously she was one of the pioneering women as a UCI commissaire, as was Beth. And really, both of them gave me lots of good insight around how in my early years, even in my early years as a UCI commissaire, how to navigate the world of being a commissaire as a woman. And it is different, and it's still a little bit different, not much as it was, but a little bit different than being a man. And so that was incredibly helpful to me. And then I think that the other person that was really instrumental to me was Andy McCord. And I started officiating before Andy did. I actually brought Andy into it. He was a track racer and then began officiating. And I think one of the things that was really important to me for Andy was he actually sat and watched me make every mistake in the book and then learned from it, right? But he gave me the opportunity to talk to somebody outside of, the meet itself, to say, man, that I blew that. And, we'll talk about, did you really? Or could that have gone that way? And maybe was that the right thing to do? And so it was he's always played that role for me whenever we work together. And I play that for him. Whenever we work together, it has been an opportunity for us to talk back and forth and to say, okay, what did we learn from that? What do we need to do differently the next time? Or did we do it right? And we need to stop beating ourselves up because we did it right. So even though I brought him into track officiating, he has always played that role for me, and that has been huge.
Very cool. So speaking about how you got into officiating and some of your mentors, what advice would you give for new officials?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sure there's a book.
Well, I want to just key in on a couple of things looking back, 40 years from what I can remember. Seek out people who are willing to teach you and then be willing to learn. And then when you learn, make it your own, take the best practices that you see from other people and that you think works for them. And then try to figure out whether there's a slightly different way to do it that makes it better for you. The outcome is the same. If you're up on the stand, picking riders out of a pack or whatever, the goal is to get the right riders in the right place, right? But there is several ways to do that. And so in my mind, if somebody tells you to score a bike race from top to bottom of a page, as opposed to across the page, or write it all down, or read it into a tape recorder, or whatever it is you want to do, you need to understand what the outcome is supposed to be, and then learn about the ways that you could do it and pick the one that works best for you. And I think that pertains to just about every aspect of officiating. However, it is different when you're part of a team, and then the team all has to be on the same page, and you don't have to do it the same way as everybody else, but you need to know that everybody else on the team understands the way you're doing it, and is clear about that, so that there are no cross signals. So I think it's find people who know more than you do, which when you first start out, it's everybody, and listen to them, right? Listen to what it is they're saying. And then if it makes sense, make it your own.
Yeah, that's some wonderful advice. And I feel like that's something that, even those of us who have been here for a while doing this can continue to make use of and continue to grow. And I also like how you say that even as you're still working now, you're finding new ways to do things, and working, for example, with Andy McCord to refine what you're doing and talk about how it goes. So really a great representation of how being an official is very learning heavy all the way, and, about finding people to talk to about how things are going and learning.
I've specialized on the track, particularly internationally, as a race secretary. And the last year, I think it was, or it might have been about 18 months ago, I worked a bike race with, I was actually training a new secretary, and it was an international race. It was a Nations Cup in Glasgow. And this young woman is absolutely amazing, and she is so tech savvy, and I am not. And so she started showing me the spreadsheets that she set up to be able to do the seeding and to be able to keep track of how riders should move through in a keirin. And I mean, she rarely ever picked up a pen. I mean, it was all done on the computer, right?
Mhm.
And I've done 3 jobs as secretary since then, and I have used all of her techniques. I've made some of them my own, but I learned more about Excel than I ever thought I would use, because it's just not something I used in an early childhood program. I didn't need it, right?
Mhm.
But even then, I mean, she taught me so many things. I'm glad I was there. I didn't teach her much, but she taught me a lot. So it was really fun.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Noreen, beside working as track secretary, you mentioned about learning from Andy McCord on some of these calls that you made. Could you share any maybe generic calls or things that you learned, and how if you made a bad call, and how did you recover from that incident?
Well, I think that the place where I've most gotten myself into trouble, whether it's as a starter or or the president of the panel, is having lost a bike race. You know, where all of a sudden, you know, things have blown up all over the place, and you're not sure that you got it right? And I think, you know, what I learned about that is there are many people around the track that are all watching the same bike race that you are. You have to be willing to say, I need the leader on the track, right? And whether it's your laps and bells person who you turn around to and they, you know, discreetly push or point to the leader on the track, or whether it's one bike race where I was the starter and actually Andy McCord was on the back straight, and I think it was in T-Town, and for whatever reason I had lost that race. I don't even remember why, and he just radioed you know, leader in turn 3 or something of that sort. But I had to be willing to say, I need the leaders, or I'm lost, or something, and not fake it, and then have to recreate the whole bike race later because you're pointing to the wrong person, or you're scoring off of the wrong person, or, you know, something of that sort. And so I think it's really important to be able to say, I need some help here, right? And particularly in a track event, you can't sit there and act as if you know what's going on when you do not know what is going on, right? And because it is almost impossible to go back and recreate it, no matter how much you want to. And it's very frustrating because track racing is a show. And even if it's a national championship and you have a little bit of time, they still need to give out medals, and you want the medals to go to the right people, right? So you don't have 2 hours to go back and watch a bike race and rescore it and try and figure out what you did wrong, right? So you have to put your ego aside. You have to realize that you're human, right? And sometimes things happen where you're lost. You know, and that doesn't make you a bad official. It makes you human, right? And the way you recover is to say, I need help. Somebody tell me where the leaders are, because I'm lost. And I've had that happen to me in an international bike race where I was the starter. I think it was the first international bike race where I was the starter at a Nations Cup or a World Cup. First woman ever to be the starter at a world championship or a World Cup. And I don't remember whether it was a Madison, or I think it was a Madison, but it was all over the place. And I mean, I momentarily lost it. And I turned around, I said, I need the leader into my radio. And I turned around, and my laps and bells person was absolutely amazing, just discreetly pointed to a rider as they came by. And I went, thank you. And then we went back to doing our business, right? And the laps and bells person, their job is to always know who the leader is, no matter what. Whether you've got crashes or anything of that sort, they always have to know who the leader is. So it was the best person to actually tell me if they're good, right? But the bottom line is being willing to ask for help.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I feel like it can loop that back to something you said earlier about keeping in mind what the actual purpose of your job is. And so when your purpose is to make the bike race happen, you'll use your team and you'll trust your team and do your best to get there. So that's really wonderful to hear. So I was thinking that we might move to some of the funner questions, and I'm going to jump down because I just really want to be the one to ask this. So we have a photo here, which maybe we will share in editing. I'm not sure. And this is you and Randy Schaefer in a pair of pants together.
Yes.
Anyway,
There we are.
Tell us more about that.
Well, that's actually kind of a long story, but I would be happy to tell you. So we had the tandem World Paralympic Championships here in Colorado Springs, and let's just say that my husband was actually coaching one of the blind tandem teams, and they were in the finals. And I think the best way to put it is my husband was not happy with the calls that we had made, and he felt like we were over officiating. And the bottom line is that the American team took silver instead of gold, and he felt very strongly that that we had blown that. And so I was incredibly upset because this was after the race was over. Obviously we didn't do this during the race. But I was incredibly upset and was just so frustrated and felt like we had done the right thing, but I wasn't sure because I learned a lot from my husband in terms of after race sorts of decompressing and really looking at and talking through what kinds of things we did. And I had a lot of and still have a lot of respect for what he sees in those situations. And he was a coach and I was the president of the panel. And let's just say that I learned a few lessons about how to handle some of those things too, because I didn't do that well either. But anyway, very upset. We're kind of, debriefing and having a beer afterwards. And Andy McCord goes out to his car and he comes back in and he says, "You have got to see what the UCI sent me today for uniform." And so he pulls out these pants, right, that were like so big. I don't know who, in terms of one person, would be wearing these pants, right? And still be able, well, never mind. Anyway, so he got these pants and we had, more than enough beers at that point that Randy and I both decided we were going to try to get in the pants together. And so we did. So I don't remember who it is that's leaning down there, but they're tying our shoes together, which was going to make it very difficult to get out of these pants without hurting ourselves. But yes, as you can see, we both were able to button and zip the pants, and it just was a commentary on the UCI's. I don't know what Andy sent them that they thought that these were the right size pants, but this was it. And so that was our trying to save Noreen from crying uncontrollably because I was so upset around. And I have to say, most people don't know this, but my poor husband didn't talk to me for 2 days. He was really upset. But anyway, so that's what that was. And I have that picture too. It's framed somewhere around here.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad that such a rough day could end in a fun memory, but yeah, sometimes those rough days when we make mistakes, they are very memorable.
Yeah, very memorable. That one was memorable. I won't forget that one.
Or, when we're not making mistakes and it's just difficult to deal with. So yeah, cheers to making that a good end of your day.
Well, but it wasn't my idea, but I was more than happy to participate.
Yeah.
If I may, Noreen, there was a Velo News article in 2021 about you being appointed the first woman president for the Olympics. That article was before the event. Tell us, how was your experience at the Tokyo Olympics?
So, first of all, it was a weird Olympics because of COVID, right? And so it had been pushed from 2020 to 2021, which was actually really good, because if it had been in 2020, around the time that the Olympics were supposed to happen, I ended up with a pretty significant case of pneumonia and ended up in the hospital. So if that had not been pushed, I would not have been going to the Tokyo Games. But anyway, there were lots of restrictions, obviously, more so than ever before. It was a hotel, velodrome hotel, etc. So there was nothing more than that. You couldn't go visit another venue, even one that was on the same grounds as the velodrome or something. You just couldn't go anywhere. And but the event itself, I had to remind myself, first of all, that was the best crew I have ever worked with. And the nice thing about that is we had all worked, the people appointed by the UCI had all worked together 2 other times before that, one at a World Cup and one at a World Championship. So that was our lead up to the Olympic Games, of making sure that the team knew each other, that we were all on the same page, et cetera, et cetera. So that was, when we finally got there, of course, we had not been officiating for, a year and a half. And so that was fun. But I went to the test event, just myself, went to the test event about 3 months before the Olympics, and got to know the Japanese commissaires that were going to be there. And so I had that opportunity. And so when you get to the Olympic Games, it's really putting together the people in the Japanese commissaires and the your colleagues from the UCI that I have worked with and that I know, and I knew exactly what to expect from them, and they knew what to expect from me. And so I think that was incredibly important. I also really enjoyed them. So when we, were back in the hotel, stuck, not being able to go anywhere, the time that we were able to spend together at meals or something of that sort, even though there was plexiglass between us as we were eating, we were still able to enjoy ourselves and enjoy each other, which was really, really good. The games itself, I went into it thinking, okay, Noreen, this is just another bike race, right? And it is just another bike race. But man, the emotions are heightened. There's no questions about that. And the first couple of days were the team pursuit, and many, many countries put all of their eggs in the team pursuit basket. And they will do just about anything to increase the chances that they're going to win. Mm-hmm. And that's what I dealt with for the first 2 days. And, I had to be the person, because I was president of the panel. I had to be the person that said, this is what we're going to do. This is not what we're going to do. You can't put that stuff on your bike. You can't use K-tape all over your body, et cetera, et cetera. Even though those decisions were made not just by me, they were made in a room behind closed doors with UCI people who were, talking through the implications of the decisions that we were making, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I had to be essentially the mouthpiece. I was never so happy as when the team pursuit was done. And I have to say, I was also excited in the way it turned out, because I think the team that was pushing the envelope the most were the Danes, and the Danes rode off against the Italians in the gold medal, and the Italians beat them. And inwardly, because I couldn't do it outwardly, I was cheering, because the Danes had pushed from moment one with the team pursuit. So anyway, as soon as the team pursuit was over, I was like, okay, this is just another bike race, right? And you know, it was. And I had a wonderful relationship with Dave Menzies, who was the judge referee. And he made absolutely sure, as he did in the other two races that we worked together, that I was clear as to why he was making a decision. You know, he would put it up on the screen in front of me. I'd look at it. I'd say, okay, I can see that. Or sometimes I'd say, Dave, I need to play that back again, because I'm not sure I could explain that, right? And so, you know, he took the time he needed to, remembering that this is still a show, that we're on a TV schedule, so we're not holding things up, but making sure that, you know, I could go to the bottom of the stairs at the platform and talk with the manager about why the decision was made. And so, you know, there was only one decision through the entire thing that I said to Dave, finally, you know, I'm not sure I would have gone that way, but I need to go talk to a manager. So, you know, we're done. And so, you know, I went and explained why Dave made the decision he did. And so that was that. But everything else, man, he's amazing. He's really, really good. So it was not an issue at all. So, so that part of the Olympics went really well. And then, of course, we get to the last day. And women's Omnium, the scratch race, the very first scratch race. And I had become very best friends with the handheld camera guy that was, you know, to my left, right? So I'm looking out at the track. I am right in front of the stand. And then you've got, to my left, you've got the handheld camera guy, and then you've got the laps and bells person, but who was on the inside of the track, but the laps and bells person. And so, so as we are, as this race is going on, where everybody's kind of watching everybody else, and they're all in this group, and, you know, Kristen Magira from Germany, who was the starter, walked up to me and he said, "It appears that they all think that they can win this in the final sprint." And I said, "Yes, it does appear that way." And then he walked back down to his position on the track, and we get to 2 laps to go, and I turned to the handheld camera operator, and I said, "Heads up, there's going to be a crash in this race," because you can tell when it's coming, right? After as many years as I've been doing it, you can tell when it's going to happen. And so the next time around, coming out of turn 4, you know, the Italian woman clipped another rider's, and it was just mayhem. And I did not know this until later, but Christian was able to pull himself up and avoid being knocked over. A lot younger than me and a lot stronger. And he was closer to the part of the track that was not, that the plastic was not as high, that the balustrade was not as high. So he was able to pull himself up. I had nowhere to go. And I remember seeing something red coming at me. And so just going flying. And I had my left arm up, and I hit that first, and then hit the side of my head, and well, really more my glasses than my head. And I separated my shoulder. And so they had to haul me off, and I was in the medical tent, and the U.S. team doctor came in, which he did not have to do, but he wanted to make sure that there was somebody there who spoke English. And so he said to me, you know, "What do you think is going on?" I said, "Well, I know my shoulder's separated." And he said, "Okay, well, let's get that put in." So he immediately did that. And then I had a gash on my leg that wouldn't stop bleeding, and I made the comment that I knew why that was the case, and then he said to me, "I need you to go to the hospital so that we can have your head checked out. I'm not worried about the gash, but we need to have the head checked out." And I told him I wanted to go back up and finish my job, and so I wanted a sling. And that, this was not how I was ending my Olympics. I wanted to go up and finish the job. So just give me a sling and I'll go to the hospital afterwards. Well, let's just say that I lost that fight. So the rest of, that I was in getting, an MRI and a CAT scan and all the rest of that, and found out that my shoulder had been fractured. And so I came back in enough time to be a part of the team picture with a sling. So the official UCI picture of the Commissaires for Tokyo is me with a sling. So so that's how it ended. And it has caused me since that time to be a little bit nervous about being on the apron of the track. So I'm ending my career serving as a secretary, which is a much safer position. and it's one that I do well. So and I really love. And so my last race as a UCI international, because I turned 70 in November, and the UCI retires their commissaires at the age of 70. It will be the Junior World Championships in Cali, Colombia, and I will be the race secretary with some of the friends that I worked with over the past couple of years, and even some that were in my class in 1997. So it'll be a nice way to end my career.
Yeah, that sounds like a lovely capstone. I didn't know about that incident at Tokyo. That is very scary, and we're glad you're okay. But wow, yeah, you really never.
You should feel free to go to YouTube or someplace fun and just Google Women's Omnium Scratch Race Tokyo 2020, and it will be there in living color.
Well, now I have to. Sounds good. I'll pick that up after this. So I wanted to ask you, you have been all over the world officiating at the track. Other than your home velodrome, what would you say is your favorite velodrome? Where is it and why?
I think it's Berlin. First of all, I really like going to Germany, and I have some heritage that would tie back to Germany. And so, and the Berlin Velodrome is so unique in that they can actually put a full-size Olympic pool inside the velodrome.
Wow.
Right. It's cool. Anyway, I really, really, really liked Berlin. And a lot of that is just really good memories there of the people that I worked with. But it's a really cool setup and a cool velodrome. So I enjoyed that. I've been some places where I hope to never have to go back, ever. And then the rest just all fall into, it's not really about the velodrome, it's about the people. It's about the local people that you're working with. It's about the commissaires that were assigned to that race. On the whole, when there's a World Cup there, or a Nations Cup, or a World Championship, they're at least, average velodromes, if nothing else. And so, it really is, in my mind, all about the people.
Super wonderful.
Noreen, you mentioned about the mandatory retirement age for UCI. What are your plans afterwards with the officiating?
Yeah, well, I can still, officiate. I just will not be traveling and officiating as an international commissaire. I want to continue to, I'm a person who absolutely loves to teach other people. And so I probably am one of the foremost teachers in the United States around the track secretary for sure. And I think I'm a pretty good PCP. I think that there are some other people who can do starter better than I can, although I certainly could teach that. But I think managing a track race is something that takes some thinking around how to do that and how to keep the show running and how to manage conflict within that. Because there's always conflict. Everybody has their role, and some people don't like calls, and you have to manage the conflict and figure out how to do that without turning it into something that it doesn't need to be. And so training is something that I really, really enjoy doing, and I have done that for the past 10 years, and I want to continue to do that. Definitely not on the road, only on the track. I'll continue to, I'm working the national championships this year, the junior and elite national championships, and I'm working the Madison national championships in Detroit, which I think is coming back full circle for me, with that being the first track race I ever saw. So, I'm going to continue to do that. I don't see myself walking away until I have to walk away. So.
Well, I'm so glad that we'll get to continue to have you. Hopefully I can
Thank you.
get some of your tutelage at some point. I'm trying to make my way into the track a little more. So definitely glad that we'll still get to see you around. We would like to finish out by saying, Noreen Landis-Tyson, track commissaire extraordinaire, how would you like to be remembered by your fellow officials?
Oh, man. Well, I think I can answer that on two levels. First of all, I think I helped to break the glass ceiling for women in certain positions in track cycling, and I really want to help get more women into officiating at the highest levels. And in particular in the track, it's still mostly male dominated. And so I think that's something that I would like to continue to do. And I think I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to do that. And I'm also grateful for all of the training that I had, that I didn't end up screwing that up too badly, so that they said, oh man, we're never putting a woman in there again. So that's a good thing, I hope. And so that's one part of it. I think the other part of it is, I think I would love to be known as somebody who was not afraid to say, I could have done that better. Was always wanting to learn and always wanted to make sure that any bike race that I was involved with, in whatever role it was, that, most of the riders would walk away from that saying, man, that was well done. I didn't agree with absolutely everything, but it was a safe and a fair bike race. Mm-hmm. And, I think that the officials were respectful to us, and that, it just, they played their role well. And everybody has a role in a bike race. And, I would want people to remember me as somebody who worked really, really, really hard to play my role well, so that it turned out to be a fair and safe, and I hope enjoyable bike race.
Absolutely. And I love how that safe, fair, fun just continues to pop up with everything we do. And yeah, I think those are some great things to shoot for, and certainly some things that I think we already know you for. So
thank you.
Yes, job well done on a illustrious career. So ultimately we want to thank everyone for joining us for this inaugural episode of our Commissaire Commentaries podcast. We look forward to seeing Noreen again, as well as all of our guests in the future. If you have any ideas, we will take them at usac.officials.podcast@gmail.com. And we'll probably put this on YouTube where you can leave comments, but we really look forward to interacting and would love to hear more from everyone, whether it's questions, things they want to talk about in the future, or something silly that you want to hear more about. And with that, we'll sign off. Goodbye from Ryan and Marcy, and maybe another note from Ryan.
Nope. Thank you very much again, Noreen. It's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you both.
Absolutely.